Alright, this is a look at Shakespeare's famous play about gender confusion. A little something called Twelfth Night for some reason. It's got doomed love, ambiguous love, accidental love, awkward love, confusing love, and no sense of personal boundaries. Here's Twelfth Night. The story begins with a shipwreck and a sweet little musical number. We get our first look at the twin protagonists, Sebastian and Viola. It might be viola. They kind of pronounce it like that in the movie, but I like viola better because that is a pretty cool instrument. And they certainly do look very much alike, but that's only when they're wearing identical wigs, makeup, and fake mustaches. It's uncanny! So Viola and a few sailors wash up on the shores of Illyria, a country at war with their homeland, which is a rather unfortunate turn of events. Viola thinks her brother Sebastian is drowned, which is very sad and all, but this movie has time constraints and we have to get to the comedy soon or else. Time for some cross-dressing! Viola decides that the best way to survive in this enemy land is to dress like a man and get a job as a servant of the local duke, Orsino, who we learn is lovesick for the allegedly beautiful Countess Olivia. Unfortunately, Olivia doesn't want to deal with any men since she's in mourning for her brother who recently died. What a romantic tragedy! It's almost as if her situation parallels Viola. So it's 3 days later, and Viola, now going by the name Cesario, has gained employment in Orsino's court. So we finally meet the lovesick duke, who's apparently an unlikable whiner. Much like a sad teenager lying in bed with his earbuds in, Orsino's been listening to Cesario play the piano in an effort to forget his sorrows. A servant comes in with news from Olivia. Apparently she wouldn't let him in to speak on Orsino's behalf. Orsino, deciding that maybe a handsomer servant would get better results, instead sends Cesario to go speak on his behalf. It's pretty good logic, actually. I mean, look at how bitchy he is. So Cesario's like, I don't think she'll let me in, and plus, I don't know how to talk to girls, and Orsino's like, what? Come on, you practically are one anyway. And Cesario's like, what? I mean, what? No way. But he persuades her to go anyway, so Cesario goes to talk to Olivia about the benefits of hooking up with Duke Orsino. Over to Palacio de Olivia, where we meet a veritable army of comedy relief, servants. They get up to some comedic shenanigans, only to be foiled by the resident stop-having-fun guy, a dude named Malvolio. These guys kind of play out their own weird little plot thing through the story, but you really don't need to worry about them right now. Olivia and her clown have a conversation about which of them is the bigger fool, but they're interrupted by the timely arrival of Cesario, who's been making a bit of a ruckus at the gate. Olivia is mildly intrigued by this and decides to let him in. So Cesario's like, yeah, I have a letter here from Orsino. Which one of you is Olivia? And Olivia's like, just read the damn thing. And Cesario's like, yeah, I can only read it to you. So Olivia sends her servants out, leaving the two of them alone. Okay, so are we sure Viola's not actually flirting with Olivia? Because this is pretty blatant. So they talk about how beautiful Olivia is and how much Orsino loves her and whoa, are they about to kiss? Oh, okay, never mind. Olivia's like, he knows I can't love him, and Cesario's like, if I were in love with you, I wouldn't understand why not. And Olivia's like, if you were in love with me, what would you do? And he's like, I would shout really loudly! And Olivia's like, wow, that was romantic. So Olivia kicks Cesario out and tells him that she can't love Orsino, but, you know, if he wants to contest the point, he can just send Cesario to talk to her more, since she'd be okay with that. Yep, Olivia's fallen in love with Cesario. Awkward. She sends her grumpy servant Malvolio to give him a ring that he supposedly dropped, but mostly to display her affection. Cesario realizes that Olivia's fallen in love with quote-unquote him, which is bad because he is actually a she, and this was a time when such love officially never happened, so this is just kind of a problem. Jump cut to Sebastian. Turns out he's still alive and has been living with a sailor named Antonio who saved him from the shipwreck. Sebastian thinks that Viola died in the wreck and he's really broken up about it, so he's traveling to Orsino's court for some reason, and Antonio decides to follow him, which is a bad idea since Antonio is not a very popular guy in those parts. Incidentally, Antonio is heavily implied to be, like, really in love with Sebastian. Back to the comedy relief squad. They're doing funny, plot irrelevant stuff. Cesario and Orsino are playing cards and talking about love. Orsino's like, is there anyone you love? And Cesario's like, well, there is someone, and Orsino's like, oh yeah? What's she like? And Cesario's like, oh, you know, she's about your height and complexion and age and your same majestic mustache. Basically, she's just like you. But Orsino, master of not taking a hint, is like, well, you know, I prefer younger girls. Maybe you should ditch her in favor of someone younger. And Cesario's like, yeah, I'll think about that. So the comedy relief squad gets a little fed up with Malvolio spoiling all their fun and begin to devise a plan to get him out of their hair for a while. Their brilliant plan is to make Malvolio believe that Olivia has fallen in love with him, and from there make him act like an idiot in front of her. Cesario is having a little internal monologue about how tragic it is that although she's in love with Orsino, he can't love her because he thinks she's a man. And at the same time, Olivia is in love with Cesario because she thinks she's a man. Yeah, it's an actual love triangle for once, rather than one of those stupid love-bent lines that all the books keep trying to pass off as a love triangle. The servants put their dastardly plan into motion. Malvolio is completely convinced, and is actually daydreaming of being a count even before he finds the forged love note. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Olivia's servant Maria has very similar handwriting to her, so she's written an ambiguous love note that Malvolio could easily interpret as being directed to him. So that's part of their brilliant plan. The note also tells him to act in certain stupid ways, which he agrees wholeheartedly to do. Olivia invites Cesario back to visit, and they have a romantic stroll through the gardens. Olivia confesses her love to Cesario. So Cesario's like, oh crap, how do I get out of this one? I don't like girls! Smoothly done. Olivia feels pretty terrible about the whole situation. Hey, it's Sebastian. He's in town. And the mysterious, mildly sinister character following him is none other than his sailor friend Antonio, who made the questionable decision of following Sebastian into a territory where he's a wanted man. Sebastian, though, is overjoyed to see a familiar face. However, they split up since Antonio's in some danger, but Sebastian's going full tourist on the town. Antonio gives him his wallet, says don't spend it all in one place, and skedaddles. Orsino's still sad about Olivia, and Cesario's like, you gotta move on, man. She doesn't love you. What if at this very moment, some beautiful but surprisingly manly girl was madly in love with you, but you couldn't reciprocate her feelings? And Orsino's like, that's ridiculous. No girl could be that in love with me. Back at Olivia's place, there's some drama happening among the comedy relief characters. One of Olivia's ditzier servants, a man named Andrew Aguchi, is angry because Olivia loves Cesario more than she loves him, and Cesario rejected her affection. In fact, Andrew is so mad he wants to challenge Cesario to a duel over it. Yeah, this should be good. Malvolio's still acting like an idiot around Olivia, and the other servants are like, wow, we must have gone crazy. We must deal with this the medieval way, by locking him in a cellar until he stops being crazy. That'll learn him. Olivia gets distracted by the timely arrival of Cesario. She's like, listen, I feel really bad about confessing my love to you yesterday. Is there any way I can make it up to you? And Cesario's like, yeah, have you considered falling madly in love with Orsino? That could help. Unfortunately, then one of Olivia's other servants shows up to tell Cesario that he's been challenged to a sword fight. This is bad news to poor Cesario, who's never had a lesson in her life. The servant, whose name is Toby by the way, is like, oh yeah, he's a demon. This guy's killed so many dudes. And then he runs back to Andrew and he's like, yeah, this kid's a madman. They say he fought for the Shah of Persia. And comedy ensues. Each duelist is convinced the other is far more competent than either one actually is. This is about how most of my fencing matches go. This part is also surprisingly accurate. Antonio has arrived on the scene. He sees Cesario and mistakes him, her, just don't think about the pronouns too much, for his beloved Sebastian and intervenes in the duel. Unfortunately, he is immediately arrested and asks Cesario for his wallet back, which of course he can't do because he doesn't have it, and also doesn't know him. Antonio gets his butt hauled off to Duke Orsino's palace, while Cesario begins to question whether her brother might have survived the shipwreck after all. Malvolio's still in a cellar. It's still hilarious. Sebastian, with the help of Olivia's clown, has found his way to her palace. Since he looks exactly like Cesario, well, allegedly, Olivia immediately charges out and tries to persuade him to love her. Unfortunately, her servants get there first, and Andrew attacks Sebastian. This has the unexpected result of pissing him off, and unfortunately for them, Sebastian actually does know how to fight. Yeah, I think the best part of this scene is Andrew's face after every punch, because it really looks like he has no idea what is happening. What? What's going on? Then Olivia runs out and makes him stop, apologizing to Sebastian, who she thinks is Cesario, and declaring her love for him. Sebastian is confused, but is not about to question a beautiful woman flinging herself at him. Then she proposes to him, and of course he accepts, because who wouldn't accept a marriage proposal from Helena Bonham Carter? The servants are still messing with Malvolio. It's still hilarious. Then Olivia and Sebastian are married. Well, that was quick. She didn't even know his name yet. Antonio's been dragged to Orsino's palace. Cesario's like, this guy saved my life, and Antonio's really broken up about the fact that the guy who he thinks is Sebastian is completely ignoring him. Olivia arrives and is like, hey husband, what are you doing here? Poor Cesario is extremely confused by this turn of events, and Olivia is understandably upset that Cesario seems to be denying that they've ever been married. She gets the priest who attests that he did marry the two of them, so Orsino is incredibly pissed at this, and he's like, I can't believe you betrayed me like this. And then Andrew storms up and he's like, help, I just got my butt kicked by Cesario, who has, of course, been standing there the entire time. So now everyone's confused, and the matter is only further complicated when Sebastian finally shows up. So Antonio's like, oh, there are two of you, I get it, and Olivia, upon seeing the two identical blokes she thought she'd married, responds appropriately.
Most wonderful.
Sebastian and Viola, yeah, remember, that's Cesario's actual name, have a tearful reunion, and the removal of her barely visible mustache makes it obvious to all observers that he is, in fact, a she. And Orsino's like, oh, so now my awkward man crush makes sense! And Olivia's like, wait, this means I actually know nothing about the guy I just married. Orsino goes and proposes to Viola, who of course accepts, and it's just freaking adorable, you guys. I can't even. Oh, wait, poor Malvolio's super traumatized. Ah, well, that guy was a killjoy anyway.